Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Series 7 Episode 8, Cold War. This episode features the return of the Ice Warriors. Now, before we get down to it, what do I think of previous Ice Warrior stories? The TV ones only, though. Okay, so the Ice Warriors were introduced in the 1967 story, The Ice Warriors, in Season 5, featuring the second Doctor. It's a bad story. It's a very bad. The animated episodes 2 and 3 that they did in 2013 were really good, but the story itself is pretty shit. My friend Matthew Moy actually really dislikes this story more than me. I think 5 of those 6 episodes are his top worst 6, or in his top worst 6. I think one of the Space Pirates episodes is also in there. Speaking of Season 6, Space Pirates, the story before that was the Ice Warriors' return in The Seeds of Death, their first return. This did replace a story called Lords of the Red Planet, which I actually do have on CD, along with another unproduced Ice Warrior story, Thin Ice. More on that later, briefly. But Lords of the Red Planet was originally going to reveal more about the Ice Warriors and her lore and backstory, but this story, I believe, was too expensive or something. So it was replaced by 1969's The Seeds of Death, which is a great Ice Warrior story. It's a great return for the Ice Warriors, and it's a great third to last story for the second Doctor. Shame the penultimate wasn't. Haven't heard Lord of the Red Planet just yet, but it does sound disappointing that we don't hear the Ice Warriors' backstory or the lore story or something, or at least we don't see it on screen. Moving into the third Doctor's era, we then come to Season 9's The Curse of Peladon, where the Ice Warriors have now, they have become good and have joined the Galactic Federation. And I like The Curse of Peladon. It's a good story. It's nice, it's short, it's the shortest Ice Warrior story of the classic era. The other 3 are 6-parters. But this one is a nice short 4-parter. It might drag a little bit, but it's still pretty good. And their final appearance 2 years later in Season 11's The Monster of Peladon, 1974, was absolutely terrible. Although a nice reveal that they were there in this hideout thing, and it was the cliffhanger of Part 3, I believe, that we found out they were there. But the story itself is pretty terrible. They were due to appear in 1986's Mission to Magnus, which would have been a Season 23 story. However, that Season 23 got cancelled and replaced by The Trial of a Time Lord due to complicated history that I've already talked about, I presume. I'll sum it up by saying Michael Gray tried to cancel Doctor Who, so it went on 18 months hiatus, and when it came back, they made Trial of a Time Lord instead of the originally planned Season 23, which has a couple of very good documentaries, including one on the Terror of the Vervoids DVD and the Season 26 Blu-ray. Not 26, 23. Speaking of Season 26, however, the following season, Season 27, was supposed to see the Ice Warriors return in a story called Thin Ice. Not Thin Ice. Well, that's what it's called in the Big Finish adaptation is called. I can't remember its actual name, but the Big Finish adaptation is called Thin Ice, not to be confused with the Series 10 episode of the same name. Ice Time, that was it. Ice Time was the original story title. And this would have been Ace's departure story, and it would have seen the 7th Doctor come up against the Ice Warriors. Season 23 story would have been the 6th Doctor. However, with the show being cancelled in 1990 when this story was due to be made, this episode didn't get made. It did get, both these 2 unmade Ice Warrior stories, like Lord of the Red Planet, did get made as Big Finish audios, as well as novelizations. But since 1974, the Ice Warriors haven't had any luck returning to television. Until 2013, the 50th anniversary year, the Ice Warriors once again faced the Doctor, this time the 11th Doctor, in Series 7 or Season 33. And what is the result? Cold War. I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of this episode. At this point in time, out of the 5 Ice Warrior TV stories so far, there's 6 at time of this video being made, but at time of this episode being broadcast, this was the 5th TV appearance. Out of the 5, this comes slap bang in the middle. I like the second and third ones. I don't love them, but I like them. I think the second one's the best out of the 5. When we come to the 6th one, I think it's either between Seeds of Death and Empress of Mars. Which one's the best of the two? We'll have to see when we get to Empress of Mars in Series 10. But Seeds of Death is my favourite of the first 5 Ice Warrior stories. Then it would be Curse of Peladon, then this, and then it's a battle between the last two, because those two are terrible. Might give the slight worst one to Monster of Peladon, because that used to be a least favourite, and is still a lower ranked one. But Cold War. This one's... okay, so it's a decent story. I'll give him that. Mark Gatiss does a very good attempt to do it. It's a decent story. I liked the addition of the Ice Warrior lore. I felt that was missing from the Ice Warrior TV stories. This maybe Mark Gatiss was inspired by Lords of the Red Planet, as well as maybe some other stuff written by Brian Hales that would have related to Ice Warrior lore, or maybe what other stories have done. In fact, the Big Finish radio audio play Red Dawn, which I also have on CD. I'll just get that out. Does have a little bit of Ice Warrior lore into it. It does try to add a little bit to their lore. Here we go. This is their first Big Finish audio, and I think this one adds a little bit more Ice Warrior lore. Well done, Justin Richards, who wrote this one. So I like the additions of Ice Warrior lore that Mark Gatiss is adding to, or basing off information we have learnt from outside the TV series that Brian Hales may have written for Lords of the Red Planet, or maybe for in some sort of lore guidebook or something. I don't know, but like the Sontarans in the Sontaran two-parter in Series 4, Mark Gatiss is able to add a little bit more to the Ice Warrior lore, and more to a villain who have only really appeared, well, like the Sontarans, only 4 times in the classic series before making a 5th appearance in the new series. But unlike the Sontarans, I don't think the Ice Warriors have as much of a triumphant return this time around. Maybe next time with the 6th Ice Warrior story in Series 10, but not so much with this one. The plot sees the 11th Doctor and Clara arrive on a sinking Russian submarine in 1983 during the height of the second half of the Cold War. As things are getting with the Cold War, it started just after the Second World War ended in 1945, and it heated up a bit more throughout the 1950s and 60s. Kind of died down a little bit in the later 60s and in the 1970s, and then it built itself back up again in the around 1979, 1980, and then throughout the 80s it was still quite still quite cold, but getting warmer until the late 1980s, early 1990s, and by 1991 it was over. Thank God, it took up nearly the entirety of the second half of the 20th century. Jesus Christ, imagine having to live through that. That's what many people did between 1945 and 1991. They had to live through the Cold War, even if the threat of war was always leaning over them. And that is a great premise for an episode, especially one with a nuclear submarine and an ice warrior on board who could, with nothing left to lose, he could set off nuclear war. The story actually opens with the Russian crew doing a drill, preparing a drill to set off the bombs. They don't actually set off the bombs, but they're doing a drill. Around a similar time, they had been drilling for oil in the Arctic, and they had uncovered a specimen frozen in a block of ice, which the professor claims is a mammoth. When he's asked about it, that does not look like a mammoth when we cut to it. It looks like a man in some sort of green armor. And then this one guy just decides to burn the ice block with a blowtorch, just because life's too short to wait till they get back to Moscow to defreeze it. Why does that guy do that? Life's too short to wait, but yeah, it doesn't quite make sense. He just does it so we can get the plot going, I guess. Richard B. Brooks actually brings this up in his 5 Who fans review in 2013. He also mentions that this story takes a lot of inspiration from Robert Shearman's Dalek. Yeah, it does. There is quite very similarities to Dalek. Like there's a lone ice warrior. He's on it's a base under siege. Technically, this is a base under siege story, which is another homage to Patrick Troughton's era. And he's drinking off the crew one by one and preparing to. The one difference here is that the Ice Warrior is prepared to blow up the world, whilst the Dalek just wants to escape and maybe kill anybody in its way. But yeah, there is a lot of similarities to Dalek. The Doctor and Clara then turn up once Skaldak started to attack the ship, and we don't actually jump into Skaldak attacking the ship. We just, after the titles, it's already happened. He's already attacked the ship or the ship's crashed or something. We can presume Skaldak's responsible for damaging the ship, perhaps. Because otherwise, I'm not sure why it's having problems. Eventually, the Doctor and Clara turn up, and they then meet the Ice Warrior, which the Doctor knows about Skaldak. He knows about Skaldak, and he knows the legends. And I really love the performance here from Matt Smith, where he's kind of like his usual fun, normal 11th Doctor personality, not silly or wacky, just normal fun. And then once Skaldak mentions his name and the Doctor knows about him, he's dead serious. He's down to business, and he remains quite serious throughout the story. After one of the crewmen knocks Skaldak out, they have him locked up, and the Doctor goes on about the Ice Warrior is very cross now. Harm one of us, harm us all. It's a code of honor about the Ice Warrior. However, he forgets to realize that the Ice Warrior attacked them first. Maybe if he was responsible for the submarine's destruction. Skaldak also not getting a response from his Ice Warriors, fellow Ice Warriors, after being trapped in the ice for 5,000 years. He then escapes his armor, which is a new thing. It's never happened before, and goes on to terrorize the crew, killing them off one by one. And eventually later leading him to attempt nuclear destruction on the planet. Why he feels the need to destroy the whole planet because these guys attacked him is questionable. It is an interesting idea that we see the Ice Warrior out of its armor, and the prosthetics arms we get is pretty cool. As is the CG of the face in the vents. We don't really see what it looks like until later on. So the story then becomes kind of a hunt based on the siege, and it's all right. It doesn't really have an awful lot. And then there's a trait that starts around here with Mark Gatiss stories, certainly with Mark Gatiss Ice Warrior stories, where you'll just have these random red shirts that will have these scenes and then they just get killed off. We get a little bit of personality from them and then they just die, basically. They're just there. There's not really much points to adding the scenes. With the guy that used the blowtorch on the Ice Warrior, even having, when he gets killed by the Ice Warrior, a little badge with a wife or girlfriend making an appearance, and that's supposed to be some sort of a character moment. I guess this is a thing with in Empress of Mars as well, where we just get these side characters who just then die when we just get a little bit to know about them. It's different from having a story where you get to know a character and they develop and then they die and the audience feels sorry. These are just half done. They're just red shirts with a little bit of personality, but not enough for us to really care that much. If it was the captain or the professor who died, then we'd care. And in fact, the professor almost does die, but Clara then manages to ask the Ice Warrior to stop. Actually, why does the Ice Warrior attempt to kill Clara at one point? I mean, I know he's killing off the crew, but why does he go for Clara unless he mistakes her for one of the crew as she's wearing one of the jackets over her dress? And I know he goes for the professor because he shot at her, but only to shot at the Ice Warrior when it attempted to attack her. But why does it go for her in the first place, unless it mistook her for a crew member? But even then, it may have recognised her, or at least her voice, from when she was talking to him earlier, when she was sent down to the vault. Another similarity to Dalek. So yeah, and then at the end, Clara is the one who convinces him to stop. Well, actually, not quite. The ending. Okay, the ending. This could be Series 7 Part 2. In fact, Series 7 as a whole, but especially Series 7 Part 2, has a reputation for bad story endings. Now, I think Bells of St. John's had a pretty good ending, and Rings of Akaton had a great ending. But this one... this one isn't very good. The Ice Warrior is about to start nuclear war. The Doctor tries to stop him, then he threatens him that he will blow up the submarine if he doesn't, which does feel a little bit of out of character for the Doctor, especially this Doctor. I can see the position he's in, but still, and it's the Doctor. He could probably find another way out. And Clara tries to convince Skaldak not to do it through talking about his daughter, who Skaldak talked about earlier. Also around this point, we get revealed Skaldak's face revealed, and it's not the best CGI. I mean, the facial movements aren't so bad, but it probably would have been good to see a prosthetic appearance of Skaldak. And then when it looks like Clara is succeeding in convincing Skaldak not to press the nuclear button, Deus Ex Machina, the Ice Warriors, turn up in their spaceship, bring up the sub, and Skaldak goes back to them, and then just lets the humans go, and that's about it. Now, whilst I do like the idea of the Ice Warriors turning up and coming for Skaldak, it would have been nice if Skaldak had listened to Clara first, stopped the nuclear bombs, asked what to do now, and the Doctor says he'll help him, and then the Ice Warriors come for him, and Skaldak is taken. The sub is rescued. Skaldak goes back to his own people, and the day has already been saved, so everybody's happy apart from the people who are dead. So yeah, the ending kind of sucks a little bit, and yeah, that's about it. I also am curious why Murray Gold decides to use the end music from A Town Called Mercy on this scene. It's a bit out of place. I can understand it's kind of like a happy music for the villain of the story, then having although a sympathetic one at that, then getting a happy ending. Not because they're a villain, but because they were sympathetic and maybe reformed at the end or something, and then they go off to they get a happy ending. Besides that, I think the track is out of place. It works great at the end of A Town Called Mercy, but here it's a bit out of place. So Cold War is not that brilliant. I do want to give a quick shout out to the sonic gun that is used. The original effect is pretty interesting, but I think the sonic we don't actually see that sonic gun that the Ice Warrior uses that much, really. But in the Empress of Mars, it turns the people into balls for some reason. Like the bodies are turned into bouncy balls. So actually, maybe just a boring red laser effect would have been a bit boring, but maybe it could still have been something interesting. I did actually like the old effect with the old sonic guns, though. Those were pretty interesting, especially when it was in black and white. I don't know if it was used as much when it was in color, but it might be quite interesting to see something like that in the revised series. Well, the Ice Warriors made a reappearance 3 years after this story. Perhaps series 13, 3 series, I should say, technically 4 years. Perhaps series 13, 3 series 4 to 5 years later, will have another Ice Warrior appearance. Maybe. Okay, other things about this episode. First of all, Clara. She's okay. Doesn't really do not an awful lot until the end. She does have some talking moments with Skaldak and interactions with the Professor, but besides those, she's just there, basically. And we don't really get to know much about her. When she's asked about what she likes to do, she just says stuff. Now, whilst that is a normal human response, it would have been a great opportunity to have something about Clara learnt, and it wouldn't have to have spoiled anything for what's coming on or damaged the whole mystery about her. We could have just learned a little bit about the character. We learned about her backstory last time, but we could have learned a little bit about what she likes to do now these days. But on the other hand, the Professor, played by David Warner, who is brilliant, he's a great character. He's a fun supporting character, as is the Captain, played by Liam Cunningham. They're good supporting characters. Matt Smith continues to be amazing as the 11th Doctor, although his character does go a little bit out of character towards the end. The other characters are red shirts. Not really worth talking about. Apart from that, there's a guy called Steffensham, who is the second in command, and he feels out of place in a time of peace. He's a bit judgmental of the captain's opinions, but that doesn't last very long. And then there's these other two. The other two most notable red shirts are these two who hang out together a little bit, but then they die about halfway through. And also the guy at the start who is just there. So yeah, there's not really many supporting cast that's to talk about, and the ones who are there, not all of them are worth talking about. The set looks pretty cool, a Russian nuclear submarine, and the model effects are stunning for the submarine. Apparently, these are the first model effects used in the show since the end of the classic series. I could be wrong about that. And Mike Tucker returned to do these effects, as he was a model effects person on towards the end of the classic series, and then came in to do models and maybe some other special effects for the new series. So it's great that I think he actually did do some stuff in the last couple of years in series 1 to 6, perhaps, and early series 7. Might have been involved in the prosthetic scenes, but it's great to have him make a model for Series 7's Cold War, and it's great to have these model shots, and we'll be getting more model stuff coming up in later episodes. But it's great to have a bit more of a practical effects used alongside the visual effects as well, creating a great visual experience. However, sadly, Cold War is just it's just an alright episode. It's not that great. It's okay. It's not. It's basically there. It's all right. I wasn't too impressed with it. It was okay. It's entertaining, but on story wise, I think it could have been handled a little bit better, a little bit more interesting. Skellact's motivations are a little bit mixed, and other supporting cast aren't that, well, characters I should say, supporting characters aren't that interesting. We could have learned a little bit more about Clara as a person, but the episode decides not to bother, and the Doctor goes a bit out of character towards the end, which is a bit of a shame. If it was the 6th Doctor, maybe it would make sense, or the 1st Doctor, or maybe even the 3rd, maybe even the 9th, but with the 11th, not so much. I can understand him getting cross and threatening to blow up the sub, but yeah. It does feel a little bit out of character for the Doctor, specifically this Doctor. Like I said, I think I could imagine it being 1, 3, 6, maybe 9, maybe even 10 to a lesser extent if he was in a really bad mood. But, well, maybe 11 if he was in a really bad mood, but he hadn't quite gotten to Dare. Maybe 12, but I think 1, 3, 6, and 9 might have. But even then, it'd still be a bit out of character for them. Maybe 7 if he was trying to manipulate them, but there isn't a manipulation here. They're pretty much serious. Overall, Cold War is just all right. It's okay. I was considering giving this a 5 out of 10. However, it did introduce some new aspects of Ice Wars lore, and Mark Gatiss clearly loves writing for these monsters, so there is some passion behind the story. Therefore, I will be giving Cold War a 6 out of 10. Yeah, it's just a little bit above mediocre. I mean, like I said, it would have been a 5, but the Ice Warrior lore additions were pretty good, so I bumped it up to a 6 for those. And like I said, Mark Gatiss clearly loves writing for these villains, so much so that he junked a Sleep No More sequel script in order to write one last Ice Warrior story for the show in 2017 Series 10. And that is, of course, Empress of Mars, which may be my favourite Ice Warrior story, but I'll get to that. I'll get to that when I get to that. In the meantime, Cold War is a bit of a disappointing return for the Ice Warriors. However, it's at this point in time, out of the first 5 television stories, it's exactly halfway between them. It's better than the 1st and 4th ones, but not as good as the 2nd and 3rd. So midway, I suppose. So that's my review of Cold War. Thank you for watching. Tune in next time for Hyde, which is the 2nd story written by Neil Cross. Well, technically it's the 1st, and then he wrote Rings of Akaten afterwards, but it's the 2nd one to be broadcast. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. So they instead made The Seeds of Doom. However, The Seeds of Doom is a great story. It's a very good story, and it's a nice, fine third to last story for Patrick Troughton's era. Shame the penultimate story wasn't. Good news is the final story was. Moving into the Jon Pertwee era with the 3rd Doctor, Season 9's The Curse of Peladon in 1972. Seeds of Doom was Seeds of Death. And they return. But instead, including one on the trial of but the Ice War, and it's still down there in the bottom rankings. And I think. Oh, there we go. So who wrote this one? Justin Richards, I think. This is during their exercise, they had previously they've been drilling oil in the northern Russian / southern North Pole during, and Skaldak, the Ice Warrior, Grand Marshal Skaldak, somehow awakes pretty quickly once frozen. Well, I suppose that makes sense, but still. But yeah. But anyway, the Doctor and Clara turn up, and then yeah, they just. So yeah. Eventually he goes around, and like I said, he goes around killing the crew I want. We got some interesting design with the hands. The hand design of the Ice Warrior. So yeah. I will say this. Actually, I'm not quite sure. Otherwise, besides that. And the model effects by Mike Tucker, who returns to do model effects from the classic series. It's great, so it's great to have these special effects, but with maybe even the 10th, perhaps, to a lesser extent. What? Tune in next time for another. Bloody hell.